Hey everybody, welcome once again to Rise of the GM, where today we're talking about some royal manipulations, an anxious retired hero, and the Ironsworn RPG. We're glad you could join us here for all that and more on Rise of the GM. Well, guys, we are here again with our co-host Eric Bright, who's been with us before.
Yeah.
We love when Eric is on the show. How are you today, Eric?
I'm doing wonderful and very excited to be back on the show. I mean, I've kept up with every episode, loving what you guys are doing, and loving to be a part of it. So thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get into Ironsworn here a little later.
Yeah.
And just so you know, Eric is home today with some animals that may make an appearance. If he is not paying enough attention to them, you may see a cat jump onto his shoulder or a dog reach up and smack his microphone right out of the way.
Well, you never know what's going to happen here. So, and there's the
tip.
Yeah. Okay. I tried it.
So we're doing Ironsworn. We're going to do our NPC like we usually do. But as always, we're going to start with an encounter starter, and Adam is going to read that for us, and then we're all just going to talk about it a little bit. So Adam, what do we have?
Yes, we have the Royal Hunt from the Eureka book. It goes like this. A member of the royal family has recently been assigned the role of magistrate, and his first order of duty is to have a local brothel burned to the ground, ostensibly for the good of the community. In truth, he patronizes the brothel regularly and wants to permanently quiet the ladies in its employ to keep them from gossiping about him. In, quote, the interest of the public good, the brothel is torched with the ladies still inside. The fact that other nearby structures will also catch fire and many innocent people will die is an unfortunate consequence of justice being done. Things get started when the PCs have to fight both the magistrate's henchmen as well as the blaze itself. At this point, the PCs can become the champions of the common people by opposing the magistrate's forces and the royal family. For a more personal involvement, a prized possession or a beloved associate of the PCs is within the brothel for them to rescue from the blaze. The people will demand vengeance, but the royal family will only remove the magistrate from the office and place him in another. A traitor will reveal to the PCs that long ago, the magistrate's ancestors struck a deal with evil spirits. The spirits would grant power and protection in exchange for the possession of a future soul from the royal bloodline. And the magistrate's soul is the one that's marked to settle the debt. If the royal family executes him for his crimes, then the evil spirits collect their payment and return to wreak havoc upon the land. The magistrate begins to stalk and taunt the PCs. This leads to another encounter where the magistrate attempts to frame the PCs by having them summoned to the local palace. The magistrate then attempts to assassinate the entire royal family and make it look like the PCs are responsible. This results in a three-way fight between the PCs, the magistrate's thugs, and the royal guards. A member of the royal family will eventually learn the truth and will succeed in killing the magistrate if the PCs don't do it first. When the magistrate is killed, the PCs will be plunged into combat with a large demonic creature who is aided by several imps and devils. The royal family is a target of the demon's wrath. Defeating the demon ensures that the royal family falls from power, but if no action is taken, every member of the royal family will perish. This is the Royal Hunt.
So,
what do y'all think?
I think that I've looked at this one before, and if anyone is in my Dormant Mind campaign, you may have recognized that there was a son of the emperor named Pearson Reeling, whose soul was given in exchange for a torque of the demon, and that if he dies, there would be some very similar things to this. Now, I used it as a seed, and I cannot tell you, I've made changes to this, and so it's not necessarily what we see here, but this is a great example of someone who leafs through a book and says, hey, I like part of this. I like a seed of this. I'm going to take that and I'm going to modify it, and I'm going to put that in my campaign. This became kind of the overarching campaign. Again, not the way this ends, but the idea that there was a son of the emperor who the emperor made a deal, and the soul of that son is part of that deal, but the emperor believes that he can keep that from happening and therefore get his cake and eat it too. And yet there are things happening in the world that are threatening that soul and threatening this entrance of the demons and all of their stuff into the world. And so I don't know if our full party put all that together yet. If not, you're getting a little bonus here today in this idea that there is a shadow and a world wound, and there has been, you guys have seen visions of this emperor and his son. Now, it's going to end completely different than this because there has been other parts added on. But I took part of this and I made it a seed for the campaign that I'm running. And again, doing a lot of altering. But from this here, do you guys have any thoughts just on like what this is that's part of a campaign? Because there's a lot of this I did not use. Obviously the fights with the henchmen and the merchant and the burning down of I didn't use any of that. So what do you guys think of this?
Yeah, I think the seed is the best way to describe it and to use it as that, because there's way too much prescription here for my taste. Like it is do this, then this, then this. And I'm like, no way. So, if I were going to take this and drop this in as an encounter, I would do what you did and twist it a little bit. But I think I could use maybe that beginning. I kind of always look for a strong start as like a hook. And so I think if, the PCs were walking up and they see smoke in the distance, and, somebody comes running out of the town. It's like, please help us. The guard's burning down half the village. And, and then they go in and this fire's blazing and it appears that guards are sanctioning this. But there's people inside the fire, and that immediately puts the PCs kind of in media res, right at the beginning. So I could see that maybe as a start. But there are a lot of things to me that don't quite make sense the way it's written. I think there are better ways than burning down the brothel that probably the magistrate would have picked.
Maybe he has a very low intelligence score, like some of our party members.
Yes, that could be true. He's like, what would be really stupid to do? And then he went out and did that. This will keep them quiet. I'll make them mad so that they all want revenge on me. And then because if any of them get saved, they're going to be blabbing. So. And then the other thing that gets me is the pact with the demon. I'm not sure that I understand the way it's written, and I like kind of Matthew how you took it a little bit better. And the other thing I was thinking is, what if the demons were not? This was not a pact. This was the ancestors ensorcelled and chained the power of these demons. But there was this thing that said, okay, the third son of the third son or something like that is when this would break. And the person who initially set the spell, to take the power for his bloodline, didn't care, because it's like, that's three generations from now. I don't care. And now here's the third son of the third son doing all this stuff. And part of the prophecy has been lost. All that people know is that they have this weird power. Right. And so I would kind of take that demon's bargain, and make that the centerpiece of this encounter, this arc, and go from there, and then see what the PCs do, because whether they're going to fight the guard or whether there's going to be a three-way, Royal Rumble here, that's up to how the PCs play it out. And so I'm a big fan of find the conflict, put that conflict in front of the PCs, and give them, interesting options for how to solve that conflict in multiple ways, which I think you can do with this, but you'd have to actually cut out some of what's written there.
Right. And I do like what you were saying, the idea that whoever made this bargain long in the past, they just were for an immediate power grab. And it's like, you know what? 3 generations, I'm not going to be here. Who cares? Because there's a lot of people who think like that in the world. And so now you've got this, you said third son of a third son. I like seventh son of a seventh son. That's like really tough to get to.
That's the big one. Yeah.
That's the big one. But like the third son of the third son is now like, what the heck? I didn't ask for this. And so you can even engender some what's the word I'm looking for? Where the characters care about this person.
A little bit of sympathy for the villain.
Sympathy. That's the word. For the villain, because it's like, oh, he didn't ask for this. Now he's dealing with it. Now, if the guy chose to burn down a bunch of, a whole brothel with everybody in it, that's probably not going to engender a lot of sympathy there.
No.
But
And in fact, I'm not even sure about the authors, because if you read that sentence again, it says the fact that other nearby structures will also catch fire and many innocent people die is an unfortunate consequence. That's not from the magistrate's perspective. That's the author's perspective, which is saying the brothel people, that's okay. Burn them. That's fine. But and the fact that the other people are going to go down, that's okay too. I mean, it's fantasy.
We needed some quotes and justice there, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I like to think that the authors were trying to put themselves into characters' position.
Yes.
Here, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what they meant. It just didn't appear clear to me when the first time I read that. I'm like, what? You think it's okay? Okay, wow, we've got an evil campaign going here. And again, maybe that's what the PCs choose. They're like, yeah, you know what? Look, we'll go in there and make sure they stay in there, but you're gonna have to pay us big. Now, I would not be for that. I want good, heroic, but I could see some players jumping at that. And again, that becomes now a contact, like this underworld criminal contact that you now have, who's demonically possessed, that can now be an NPC that they're on the side of, because they know they have to keep him alive to keep the power, or else the demons break free. So
that's a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a little astounded because I picked this. I read it again twice this week, made notes on it, and somehow missed the fact that this is what you used, Matthew.
Well, it's because I used a small portion of it, but that idea, if you would have been thinking about some of those flashbacks, the thing is, you guys didn't get, it's not like you've had those like in your face. These are the sprinkles and drips that are happening, that are leading up. And I probably kind of focused more attention on them right here, right now, than I have throughout all of the game, in just saying, this is kind of part of where this started.
This is one of those, this story for me, kind of pulling back some of the campaign stuff. So like Eric and I were in the first part of this, and then I'm in the second part of this with another group, and I've gotten to see, my characters have not, but I have as a player gotten to see this aspect of what's going on, and then this aspect of what's going on. And that's a hard, like, meta thing not to, my as a player, I'm freaking out in these moments, and then as a character, I have to be like, oh, cool. Yeah, I guess we'll work with this guy. It's like that kind of stuff. So it's been pretty interesting. But going back to this, like, one thing I agree totally. I like look at this and I'm like, this is almost like 3 encounters for me that I would want to bust apart. And it's like, there's the brothel situation with some idiot magistrate who is just doing something really dumb and it needs to be dealt with. I love I really like the kind of pact situation. And it's like, well, we have to keep this dude alive. I do get a little confused, and it may be just the way I read it, about like, I feel like you would actually, I guess it depends on what the pact is, but you would want to keep him alive, but it seems like they're wanting to kill him. And I'm not really sure what's going on with that. So that confuses me. I do like,
didn't quite make sense with that at the end.
So, I mean, this is one of those, you all may be out there grabbing something like this, finding something on some of those Instagram things, or maybe you have a like a module even, and you're like, I don't really know if this works right. Like you can tweak that, you can make those twists and like make it fit the way you want it to. And I think that's a really good thing. Kind of looking at the trader, a question I had, like, how, if you guys were just kind of playing this straight up, how would that like trader person kind of come into play in your opinion? There's someone shows up and they're like, hey, I have all the info. What would that look like for you guys?
Well, boy, I don't know that it would be a traitor, would be my first thing. It could be a lore master of the royal line, that everybody's forgotten. There's a dusty old book sitting on a bookshelf that somebody's like, it was about this time that the family came into real power. And maybe it's not that they know, maybe it's a mystery that the PCs have to put together through records at that time. And then they figure out, through maybe it's another means, an imp shows up who was not contained, but was part of the clan that did get contained, and goes, oh, hey, and starts whispering, lies in their ear, little worm tongue like, right? And trying to get feed the PCs enough truth that they will follow along, but trying to crack that cage that's around the demons. So I don't know that it would be a traitor as much as it just would be information.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. Or if it was a traitor from the magistrate of the royal family, it would be because he wants something. And so you could begin to like give your PCs like a conundrum, he wants something and it's not good. This magistrate's also doing stuff and it's not good. Now, which are you going to choose?
Yeah,
or are you going to choose either? Give him a choice there. But
maybe it's the second son of the third son who wants the third son of the third son to be dead so that he can re-up the pact. He wants the demons to come out, and then he's going to re-up it for himself because now he thinks he understands he's been doing it his whole life, and now his little brother's about to ruin it, so maybe that's the traitor.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. My headcanon is that they tried to do the seventh son of the seventh son, but the demons were like, no. That's too many people.
You're never going to have seven who have seven.
Yeah.
That's not working. So, yeah, that's cool.
All right. So the good thing about this, the good thing about even as convoluted as this is if you're a starting, GM and you're like, okay, I'm going to take part of this and I'm going to go. Yeah. You know what? I want another little part. I'm going to grab the other second little part of this and go. Or I really want to just kind of fall through all three of these and see where it takes me. You can do that. So again, it's the beauty of choosing for yourself. This is the thing that really kind of sparks in me. And that's always what we will advise here on Rise of the GM. Don't feel like you have to do as written. Find the parts that speak.
Yeah. Sure. One thing to look for, if I could add just one last bit here for our ascending GMs to look for, is a fantastic location. So if you're reading through an encounter and it brings a location to mind, like the 9 circles of hell or wherever these demons are from, so a couple of locations you could pull from here is, what's the demon's home plane look like? Do you need to make a trip there? Or where are these demons being caged? And what is that thing like? What is this place that has the power to guard the demons? And can you go and re-up that seal? Can you seal it beyond the pack that was already there? That could be another kind of fantastic location where you've got these floating pillars and, things going around, and there's this guardian of pure light or whatever. So, let your imagination go with the descriptions of places, because the people who like to explore, like our resident ranger here, Adam, and see some of that natural beauty and see what's out there, or just amazing things. You can give that through some of the locations that you can find.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
And now my headcanon is that you're going out to find a seal that's the second seal of his family to help set the second seal against. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this like an ocean seal or like a glyph?
Yeah. No, it's an ocean seal.
Both.
And that's where the beauty
Stop
comes
clubbing, baby seals. Yeah.
All right. Hey, let's go on to our main topic. The reason we have Eric Bright with us here today, and I'm going to let Adam set this up. I'm going to tell everybody here on the podcast, I get to be in your shoes. I've never played this game. I don't really know much about this game at all. And so we're bringing you a kind of a different system than we always are talking about Pathfinder and D&D. That's kind of where we got our roots. But we have some of these other games that are also super interesting and exciting. And so we're bringing one of those to you today. I'm going to be sitting with you in your shoes, and I'll get to ask some of those newbie questions if there are any, and you can always throw them in the chat as well. But I'm going to let Adam kind of set it up, and Eric, between the two of them, set up this Ironsworn.
Yeah. So I was actually looking back kind of in prep for this, and we played online for the time that Eric and I and Evan played Ironsworn. I was looking back on our Roll20 page just to kind of refresh myself, and I'm like, it was about a year ago that this was happening, or at least kind of when we ended that. And so it's been a bit, but Eric, you had floated the idea of playing this game that we had not delved into yet. Just sounded really cool, and just like a new system to be able to do that. And so I love Ironsworn. We didn't play like forever. I don't know how many sessions, like probably less than a dozen, maybe something like
probably.
that. And this is one of those, there's only been a few times. I think with Upwind also, which we'll probably talk about in the future, those two systems, like I felt like we played a shorter amount of time than I was used to with what I'm going to call a traditional fantasy game, and felt like the story moved like just as far as like, oh, I went to level 15 in a D&D game, and like Ironsworn specifically for me, we got to the end and I'm like emotionally like attached to what was happening. Like, oh my gosh, I gotta have to go process this for the next 2 weeks before we do anything else because of that. So I love it. I love what we've experienced and love that you had run that game, and was really excited to talk about it and just kind of delve into like the mechanics and the storytelling aspect, and just like share this with any of our listeners. So how, I guess, like to jump into Ironsworn, like how did you even get connected to begin with that game, and kind of what led into that point where we were like playing it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, back in ye olden times, there was this thing called Google Plus Groups or something like that, and it was when we were in one of our Pathfinder games, and I was Golderon, the guy who miniaturized himself, and then I had the owl I put in the that I made the cage out of my horns on his head, and I had like the AC of 40. It was amazing. Anyway, so I started exploring solo RPGs like we talked about last time through that, and there was a group called I think it was called the Lone Wolves on G+, and part of that was Sean Tompkin was there, the author, or at least had a presence there. I don't know if it was followers or if it was directly him, and he was developing the game at that time. And so it was really in beta for, I don't know, 5-6 years, something like that. So this was probably, I mean, this was pre 2018. This had to be like 2016, 2015, somewhere in that range. And he worked on it and worked on it and worked on it and kept refining it and just like didn't put it out, and I didn't play it at that point because I honestly, I just didn't really grok it. Because like we said, D&D Pathfinder is really our thing. And this was so different. And I knew it was in beta, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just put it to the side. And then he did eventually publish it and did this amazing thing. He published it for free and gave it to anybody who wanted it. I mean, yeah. And it has, art and stuff in it. And now he did a lot of that himself through stock photography that he was able to kind of manipulate and put together. I mean, it was just a huge labor of love for him that was built from the ground up to be able to solo RPG, but not necessarily, that wasn't necessarily the main way. It was just one of kind of 3 channels for how to do it. And so once it came out free, I'm like, man, I've got to actually support this guy. And so, and I think it's still available for free right now on Drive-Thru. The original Ironsworn is, but if you order the hardcover book, that's when he actually makes money. So he'll gives the PDF out for free, and then you can order the hardcover. So once I moved here to Georgia, and lost our gaming group, and started playing solo a lot more often. I'm like, okay, I need to delve into this, and just absolutely fell in love with it.
By the way, just a quick note. It's just so sad that we lost our gaming group just before all this online stuff happened.
Yes,
we could have kept it going
because I know, because it was it's like we moved, and then the pandemic was like, oh, technology push forward, like so because even doing this podcast like this was unheard of when I moved here 5 years ago. Like it wouldn't have been this easy, so anyway, at that time I started playing it, and just it's probably boy, it's got to be my favorite game of all time, I think. Evan talks about trying to find the perfect game, and doggone it, this is almost it for me. So everything that I play compares to this from now on. Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool.
That's awesome.
So again, most people are probably going to be coming in like, I may have seen some things, but never really experienced it or heard it played. Could you talk just into like how the game runs for someone who's like never heard of this? So you're talking to Matthew here at this point of like, how does the game look as you're playing? How does it kind of maybe look different from what we're used to with like a D20 kind of system, that kind of situation? Yeah,
sure. So around that 2015, 2016 time as well, narrative games were starting to really come to the forefront, or starting to be explored, I guess, at that point. They didn't really come to the forefront until probably after the pandemic, because a lot of people were playing solo RPGs at that point. But they were starting to take root. And one of the first of that kind was the Apocalypse RPG. And so then there became all these kind of follow throughs or follow afters of Powered by the Apocalypse. And one of the signatures of these Powered by the Apocalypse games was story first, right? It's the narrative first that drives everything. And the mechanics are meant to support the narrative. And much in the way that Red Markets just has one of the most amazing tie-ins between mechanics and theme that I've seen in an RPG. Almost all the Powered by the Apocalypse games have mechanics that are meant to drive the story forward more than they are meant to do something, right? So it's it's not necessarily an action as much as it is how does the story go from here? Where do we progress towards this conflict or resolving this conflict?
Okay.
And so then a lot of pieces came out from Powered by the Apocalypse and people hashing that stuff together. Blades in the Dark came out with clocks, right? And this idea of clocks where you would set up goals and you would kind of tick off towards those goals. And so Ironsworn kind of took all this and in my mind streamlined it. So and put it together in kind of one beautiful package, I think. So the way it works is you design your character. Characters are classless. You get instead what are called assets, and they come on little cards like this, right? So we've got just regular poker size cards that you have your assets. And if there's one complaint I have, it's that the wording of these assets are not in the book itself. But that would have made the book like too big,
gigantic.
So that's it's more of a practical thing. But it's classless, and so you can pick things like here's my wyvern companion, right? I've got this dragon companion that comes with me. I've got which we're going to see a little bit later. I've got the sentient blade that that I have in my possession, and combined some of its setting to go with it, which is kind of a low magic. Kind of darker fantasy. So like here's a ritual is how they do magic.
Right.
And this is bind, and it says when you wear an animal pelt and dance in the moonlight. And all of these Powered by the Apocalypse things have triggers that are worded like that. When you, and anytime that when you blah, blah, blah happens, then there are directions that say you should do this thing or roll this thing. And then the result tells you that. So you create your character out of these ritual magics, companions, combat traits like my favorite one was a staff, and a path, which is kind of like a discipline that you might study, which is the closest thing. And then you do have stats. And one of the more brilliant things that he did with the character sheet, I think, and again, this is great radio, but I'll show it here, is the character sheet you have really four tracks four stats that you're keeping track of, and it's built so that they run around the sides of the character sheet. And so you can use this paperclip just to move up and down as your health goes up or down.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a very practical solution to tracking this stuff rather than erasing and going through it. So you've got your stats of health, spirit, which is really, your resolve to keep going, supply, which you need to survive out in the wilderness, and this thing called momentum, which is almost like inspiration, similar to D&D. So you lump all that stuff together with some stats that are not normal stats. They are edge, iron, heart, shadow, and wits. And those make up your character. And it's kind of like, if I've got a high shadow, how does that play out? I'm sneakier, I might lie and things like that. But again, it's trying to tie the mechanics to the fiction of what your character would look like.
Right.
And so one of the first things I like is you can build any character you want with these assets, and you slot them together, how you would like to put them together. And so you're not bound to a single class with just these options. Now, don't get me wrong. 3.5 we know was option after option, right? For characters, which is why we need a feat every level. That should be standard. I I mean, that's
Amen.
everybody's got to do that. Otherwise, you can't get the character you want. So, but I feel like it's a little bit easier to kind of dial in the character that you would like to have in this sense. So you do that, and then you set up your world. It's even got directions for you go through an exercise that's about an hour long, maybe half an hour, where you ask yourself questions about what the world looks like, and you piece it together. What is religion like here? What is magic like here? Why did we come to this place in the first place? We were driven from our homelands, but what did that? Was it disease? Was it barbarians? Right? And so those are called the world truths. You put that together, and then you're ready to play after kind of doing all these narrative pieces. So I didn't get too much into the mechanics there, but how does all this narrative stuff, as far as putting the character together and things, is that making sense so far? Because I got lots more.
And it's something that I love in a game. I think narrative has always been like the heart of what I want to do, and so a game that kind of focuses on that is really interesting and exciting.
Yeah. So if you're looking at like mechanics, kind of moving in that direction, I kind of have some in my mind, but for you, as you're looking at, again, we're kind of comparing to more mainstream things that people would know. What are like unique mechanics that you would say these are the kind of hallmarks of Ironsworn?
Yeah, so one is just the dice resolution system, which I have not seen anything really like it anywhere, and it works near perfectly. That I don't see, even when he did the sci-fi version, it's the same dice rolls. He didn't have to make any changes at all to how that worked. So the main resolution mechanic is you have 3 dice. You have a D6 that is yours called the action die, and you roll that and you add your stat. So in a lot of ways, it is bog standard. Instead of a D20, it's a D6, and you add your stat, right? Yeah. But what you're trying to overcome are the other 2 dice, which are 2 D10s that are called the challenge dice. And where it kind of shares some room with the Powered by the Apocalypse is through degrees of success. So if I roll my D6 plus my stat, and it is above both of the challenge dice, that's called a strong hit. And so if I make a move, whether it's a combat move like strike, or whether it's like a reactionary move like face danger, or even securing an advantage, right? Or traveling across, doing overland travel, you might roll this as well. A strong hit based on the move, it will tell you what you need to do. You might get plus momentum as a mechanic, mechanical benefit, but it'll also give you some narrative in there, like you make your way through the woods, or you are able to deal harm to this guy in a fight. So it also gives you direction in the story, which is one of the things, again, that I think is kind of unique, even in Powered by the Apocalypse systems. Dungeon World was great as a follow-up to the Apocalypse, but it didn't have this built-in where when you blah, 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 and get a strong hit, here's the narrative thing that happens, like Ironsworn has. If your D6 plus the stat beats one challenge die, but not the other, so if the other is tied or above you, then that's a weak hit. And there again are details. And so that's like a success with a twist, right? If you're thinking Sentinels. Yeah. And then if your D6, your action die plus your stat is lower or equal to both of the challenge dice, then that's a miss. And then it has the added bonus, much like red markets, where if the D10s match, basically you just make the result even bigger. So, it says, so it's like the yes and, or no and. It's even worse than we thought. That's usually what happens. And there's a cap too on, so if you're rolling a D6, you get a 6 and you've got a +3 stat, you might get a +2 bonus from a move from one of your assets or something like that. So potentially you could get 11, but you can't. The highest you can ever roll is a 10. And so that means there's always a chance that you're going to get a miss, and it's bad because you could roll triple 10s, and that's like the worst thing that could ever happen because you did as strong as you could. And people have even taken that dice mechanic and tied narrative to it by saying how hard the challenge dice landed ends up being how difficult it actually was to do. So, right, you're trying to climb a cliff face and you're facing danger, and the challenge dice both roll double 1s and you rolled a 7, and you're like, you thought this was a cliff, and then as you round the corner, there was a staircase, and you just walked right up. And so even using that dice resolution can lend itself to the mechanics, but everything is done with those mechanics in mind, where you're adding something. The only other mechanical pieces are your the tracks, like your health and spirit, and momentum. At times you will roll plus those things, and that can be another thing besides your stat that you're rolling with. But your health does actually like affect you, so there can be a little bit of a death spiral where when things get bad, they can get bad fast. Which fits kind of the grim fantasy. And I know you've got momentum and progress. I know we talked about looking at those, but just, how do you guys feel about that dice mechanic? I can't think of anything like it necessarily that we've played before.
Yeah, no, it sounds similar to some, but different.
Yeah, that like double D10 with red markets is kind of, but it's not got the weak and strong hit. It's just 2 dice you're trying to modify and then roll over the top. So when I played that, I think I had played enough red markets that I was like, oh yeah, I kind of get this, but it does have a different effect. And I really loved that. The weak and strong or miss kind of, I mean, obviously you don't want to miss and you always want the strong hit, but like, the way that would affect the story was a really cool mechanic to that. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, because even the misses would drive the story forward, because there was usually something that, oh my gosh, okay, this thing happened, and that's going to now affect what we have to do as our next step, or something like that.
Yep. And that was the thing. I started listening to just a bit of the creator and his son playing this game, and the thing I noticed was that every roll basically gave a chance for story. And so very much what you said there. Now I don't know, you were probably planning to talk about those other 2 areas. I had a question about something, but I'm going to wait on it because I think we'll get to it in a bit. I'm going to let you go on with
Okay. So momentum and progress.
Right.
Yeah, I thought those were 2 really good things to kind of hit on because they seem like a unique, they're a unique aspect to this game. Yeah,
no, I would agree. So, first of all, let's maybe tackle momentum. Momentum is, it's just that. It's, is your character on a roll? And as you go through and make different moves, like secure an advantage or things like that, if you were doing well, then you can build up momentum. And momentum runs from -6 to +10. And so you can go negatives or positives. And then at any point, you can do what's called burn your momentum. And when you burn your momentum, you in essence make that your die roll, right? That's your action plus stat. So if I've got 7 momentum, and I rolled like a 2, I've got a +1 on my stat, and I rolled a 1 on my action die, and there's a 3-4 on the challenge dice. Well, okay, this is something I don't want to fail, and I made a really terrible roll, but it's overcomable because I can burn my momentum to make that happen. So as if I'm at a 7, right? And I beat them both, the 4 and the 3. So in a lot of ways, it's a little bit similar to inspiration in D&D, where or advantage, where you get to kind of roll twice and see what's bigger, but you get to choose it more precisely. It's more like like this is the time I want to burn it, and I think that's why they chose the term burn, because I mean, really, it is a big deal if you're going to burn it, because the other piece I like about it is it slowly builds, right? So over a session, you might be able to burn momentum once, maybe twice throughout one night of playing or something like that, depending on the moves that you make. But it's a big deal, and it really can turn the tide, which is the name of another move, by the way. Turn the tide, so which you can do once per battle. When you risk it all, I think is the wording. When you risk it all and put it all on the line. And so there are pieces like momentum and turn the tide and things like that can kind of help mitigate some of the gritty nature of it as you're making progress, which is the other piece, which I think is fairly unique, but it really came from kind of Blades in the Dark in my mind, and clocks. So instead of clocks, he's got a 10 box, rectangular array of 10 boxes. And any goal that you have, whether it's a fight or it's find the legendary sword of Atashwa, or defeat the dragon or whatever. You're going to assign it a difficulty level, and there are 5 difficulty levels. And then based on its difficulty level, you mark off so many boxes, right? So, for example, the most epic level, which is epic. So if it's the most difficult thing, what you do is you put 1 tick inside of a box, and to fill a box takes 4 ticks, right? To fill a single box of the 10 takes 4 ticks. So if you are on the easiest one, you actually fill 3 full boxes all at once if you do something successful. And so depending on how hard the quest is or the combat is or whatever, it can go quicker, it can go slower. And I like that, again, you get to kind of dial that in. One thing that was pretty harsh in Ironsworn that they pulled back a little bit in the sci-fi version is that difficulty level also determines the amount of damage that your character takes. So if you are fighting an epic level dragon, then you would take you've got 5 health, and you would take all 5 hits all at once from that epic level dragon. But again, in this setting, it makes sense. And from a very the easiest level, you would only take 1 damage, right? So if you think damage levels 1 through 5, that's how much damage you would take during a fight. So if you go through and you're trying to do this quest, milestones are what you're looking for. And again, this is part of the story, part of the narrative. If I'm trying to quest for this sword, one thing might be, okay, I've got to find the last blacksmith who sharpened this sword, 50 years ago, but maybe he knows something about it. And so when I find that blacksmith and talk to him and learn something, I would mark progress on my progress chart. And if this was an epic level thing, then again, it would just be 1 tick. If it was dangerous level 2, you would mark 2 full boxes, or whatever it happens to be. And so when you hit milestones in the story, then you mark this progress on your progress tracks.
Yeah.
And so most characters have lots of tracks going at the same time, because you might have one big overarching kind of quest that you're making progress on, then kind of maybe a separate track that you're making progress towards a milestone for the bigger one.
Yeah, that's right.
You might have a separate track that's a fight that you're in, so you can narrow it down to a track for what you need. And again, I think it's a beautiful and easy implementation for how to keep track of where am I hitting these important story beats and getting mechanical rewards for that. And then
so what happens when you hit a progress full, like a bar gets filled up?
So at any point that you want, you can roll to finish your progress chart, whether it's at 3 boxes or 10 boxes or 2.5. Okay. And the general consensus out there, which I don't agree with, by the way, is as soon as you hit 6 boxes, you should roll. And no way. Like, I fill them up every time. I go all the way to 10. That's right. Like, I'm not taking any chances. So
what happens if you don't roll it? Is there a consequence?
Yeah. So when at any point you go, I think I've completed this, and let's find out if I completed it. So maybe you talk to the blacksmith, and you're actually only at 4 boxes filled after talking to the blacksmith, but you go, you know what? I think this blacksmith is hiding it. I think he knows exactly where it is, and I think we've got all the information we need. And so what you do at that point is you roll just the 2 challenge dice and compare that to how many boxes are completely full on your progress chart. So if I only had 4 boxes full, then 4 is the total. So I would have to roll 1, 2, and 3 on both of my challenge dice to get a strong hit. But it does strong, weak, and miss, just like always. And so one of the things you kind of got to get used to is, like in a fight or something, I would always go to 10 boxes, or maybe 9 occasionally. I would stop at 9, especially if it was easy, because you go 3, 3, 3, and then you're at 9. And I would go, I deal the death blow, and my strike hits, and it allows me to fill up to 9 boxes. And then I'll go, I'm ending the fight right now. And so I end the fight, I roll 2 challenge dice, and lo and behold, it's double 10s. And I had 9, I'm like, but I just said I dealt the death blow. It's how is that? And so then you got to go back and, okay, what makes sense in the story? Well, I dealt the death blow. The guy died, but all of the reinforcements arrive, and now I'm about to be captured, right? Or I thought I dealt the death blow. Turns out it was an illusion. he wasn't really the big bad wizard. It was,
Right.
he's hiding behind the curtain. And here's my zoo back.
Behind the curtain. Yeah.
And so, so you got to think, how does the story, twist and turn based off of the roll of the dice, rather than, okay, I'm all the way full, so I automatically get it. Not true. This is not a binary system. It's not, success or failure. There are degrees of that, which again are one. It's a wonderful thing, I think.
Yeah, I had to reframe because I don't want to like jump ahead, but so our campaign that we did ended with failure.
Yes.
And like we lost, and I'm like, that was part of my like processing. I'm like, I've never lost an RPG before, but I had to reframe that because it wasn't I mean, we lost in the story, but it really isn't about like, oh, I lost like as a player.
Right.
The story was told.
Yeah.
We just happened to not succeed, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was the thing I had to kind of process coming off of that, was like, okay, we're all right. Well, we're ready. We'll meet up again in 2 weeks and go from there with the next thing. It's like, I have to like think on this about, okay, like there was a story told and it wasn't the one I was hoping for, but do you remember what we were at? Cause I feel like our tracker was pretty high and
it was
rolled poorly in it. And it just, the dragon got away, kind of thing.
I think we were at 8 progress, and, we were trying to kill this dragon. Yep. Right. And we had this girl with us who was, had this undead magic that was connected to her undead father, who she had this kind of love-hate relationship with. And you had kind of taken her under your wing.
Yep.
And we had this artifact that we didn't know what it was, but we knew it had power over the dragon. Mm-hmm. And so we took it to the dragon and we're fighting it. And fighting the dragon was a separate progress track, right? And so we actually beat the dragon, and when we rolled the challenge dice, we did kill the dragon, and so we affirmed that we killed the dragon, right? And so we had actually defeated the dragon, or at least we thought the dragon was dead, and so we said, well, then our whole quest is over. So for the stop the dragon from ravaging the homeland or whatever, then we rolled that, and I think we had 8 progress on it maybe. And I think we rolled like a 9 and a 10, right?
Yeah.
And it was a complete and total miss. And so what ended up happening was the guy from the very, very beginning, remember these cult of ice wizards from the very, very beginning. One of those guys stepped out, and the artifact floated up to him. And as it did, it cracked, and there was a baby ice dragon in there. And so what we were supposed to do was like the egg of this dragon, we were supposed to like kind of negotiate with the dragon or whatever. And we never quite pieced it all together to try and get the dragon just to stand down at least, because we had its kid. And instead this ice wizard now, cause we were drained. We had people dying from the fight with the dragon. So we're sitting out there bleeding out, and he goes, now I have this dragon that I will raise as my own. And now I will rule instead of that dragon.
Right.
And he froze us and left us for dead. And, and we lost. And the girl who had put her faith in you, lied there dying right next to you, Yep. And Evan and I's characters who were rooting for you to become the clan chief of all the wolf clans throughout the worlds, because every time we went to a wolf clan, you decided to challenge them for leadership. We were like, we're behind you, buddy. And, we were down there and died too. And so, that's what happened at the end. And I still felt like it was a good story.
Yeah,
it was a really good story. And none of it. Here's the other beauty about running this system. So for ascending GMs out there thinking about this, none of this I had planned ahead of time, right? And I was kind of running it and playing it with you guys through that kind of co-op play. And I had originally thought I was going to run it, and then one of the guys stepped out, and so when it dropped down to just the 3 of us, I started playing instead.
Yeah,
and it was more just, where did the dice go? What makes sense in the story, and how do we move that forward, right? Mm-hmm. And so what could have happened when we rolled the dice is we could have said, no, the dragon's not dead, or we could have said the dragon's dead, but there's a cave in, like there could have been lots of things, and that was just kind of that wizard coming back full circle was kind of what made sense in my mind, and so that's what we went with. And so
yeah. So a question I have, one thing, Rob Henry in the chat said, Dungeon Crawler Classics lets you burn your luck in a stat in a similar way. It's like the momentum that we were talking about earlier, and I'll have to check that out because I haven't seen that.
By the way, let me make a comment here. So this is part of my thought process. I was listening to you talk about momentum, and even with this luck thing, they're a little different than I thought it when I was first hearing this. And so they both sound like you kind of have this reserve, and then it's like a roll for like not a last gasp, but like a one big hit, and then it all goes away. Yeah. Whereas when you were first saying there's this momentum stuff, I was thinking, okay, so I also do a football podcast, so I think a lot about football. And one team is going and they have all the momentum, and then something happens and it just seems like it shifts, and the other team has the momentum, and it's like that first team can do nothing right, and like everything just bounces the way of the second team. It's like, oh, that ball bounced just out of bounds before somebody could intercept it or whatever, and then momentum, you can see that momentum shift really changes it. It's a real thing in a game. Momentum can change a game. And so when I was thinking about it, I was thinking like this thing that as things are going well, you get this small plus to you all the time because momentum's going your way. But if ever you miss, then it swings the other way, and then you're getting this small minus to you all the time because now momentum has shifted, but then it can shift back again. And so instead of like build up and then spend it all on one thing and then it's gone, I was seeing it more as like this kind of floating positive, negative addition or subtraction to what you're doing based on, have you been having success? Yeah. You still get the momentum.
Yeah. So I told you this, best game of all time. That's in there. Okay. So yes. So that's in there for combat, but they call it initiative. Okay. So if you're in a combat and you have the initiative, right? So you can make stronger moves. So there are two combat moves. There's one called Strike and one called Clash. And then in Starforge, there's ones like Gain Ground that are a little bit more generic than just combat. But if you have the initiative, you can make that stronger move, which makes you more progress. If you don't have the initiative, if you lack the initiative, you can only make kind of these weaker moves that are a little bit more defensive in nature. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And so you don't get quite as many rewards for that. And that changes, by the way, per player. So when we were fighting the dragon, right, all three of us were fighting the dragon, I might have the initiative against the dragon because I just had a really awesome move and took it by surprise. Yeah. Adam got whapped by the tail. He doesn't have the initiative. And Evan, I think, actually got pushed into the frozen water and was like dying in the frozen lake. So he didn't have the initiative either. Right. And so that kind of, and that swings back and forth on a move by move basis that the players make. Yeah. And that's another mechanical thing too, that you want to make sure if you're running it to, and you guys have talked about this, moving the spotlight between the people, since there's no what we think of as a traditional initiative system, you got to make sure everybody's kind of getting their turn because like me, I can just keep talking forever. You can keep doing the moves forever as well. You can go, okay, I hit this and then hit that and then hit that, but you got to kind of give everybody a chance because think of it as like this swirling melee where everybody's kind of acting at the same time. And so you act and react. And that, so the initiative there, I like saying on the offensive or on defense rather than initiative, just because I think that's a little bit more clear. But it's, again, that's a nice mechanic that backs up the narrative. And like you said, it absolutely makes a difference even on the football field.
Yeah. I like that. The other question I had from earlier, and this may be what you were talking about with the progress. Adam was telling me just a little bit about this, and that there's this system of vows that happen, and you make these vows and then you can have multiple vows. Is that the progress? I mean, is that the same?
Yes. So the reason it's called Ironsworn is because the setting very heavily into the mechanics is that you swear on a piece of iron. Iron, for whatever reason in this setting is, mythical or whatever. And so whenever you take on a quest or something, you swear an iron vow. And even when you swear an iron vow, you roll your action die plus your heart stat versus the challenge dice. And there's strong hit, weak hit, and miss. And depending on how that happens, that sets the tone for how you begin the journey,
Right.
right? So if you've got a miss, you're kind of like at a loss. Where do I go? The thing that I thought I was going to start off investigating is not going to work. I know immediately that doesn't help at all. Where if you got a strong hit, you're like, okay, not only do I know where I need to go next, but I also get +2 momentum as I start out, so that it builds up my momentum track. So you make these vows for most of your tracks. The only thing you're not swearing an iron vow for really is combat. Or if there are, he added in a little bit later, like kind of social encounters type. You could use progress for social encounters. Scene challenge is something that's similar, that would not have, like, you're trying to survive an avalanche, right? So that may not have you wouldn't vow in the middle of an avalanche,
right?
But for the most part,
I vow to survive this avalanche.
Yes. And so one of the things that people discovered as we were going, and this is in one of the supplements that I wrote, is you want to word your vows carefully, because if your vow is, I want to kill the dragon, there's only one outcome for that, the dragon is dead. And so when we actually went after the dragon, it was, we want to stop the threat of the dragon over this region. Right. So then we, depending on how the dice rolled at the end, well, there's, oh gosh, she's sorry.
She had something to say about that.
Yeah, she didn't like the dragon. She didn't like it when we faced it either. But depending on how the dice roll, that can change what the outcome of that vow looks like. And so if you word it in such a way that there's only a binary outcome, you're limiting what you can do, which goes back to our encounter starter being so prescriptive. That's why I don't make your vows prescriptive either, right? Or your milestones prescriptive. Leave it open to what, this helped our quest. Well, let's mark progress. So that makes sense that worked, right? And so then you can mark progress on your vow at that point.
So you can have more than one vow at a time, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So I like this because as a GM, oftentimes I have a party of people, and they start going on these adventures, and maybe one of them so let's go to the Jade Mask that we're in now. My character, his older brother was at this at the Arcana College and high up, and his other brother had been kidnapped and taken. And so I had like very strong things that I wanted to get done, outcomes. You could say I could vow that I'm going to bring my brother back, and I vowed that I was going to confront my older brother. Okay. But some of the people in the party don't really have a big thing, and they're just kind of floating along and they're doing stuff. And so when you're a GM in something like Pathfinder D&D, it is really up to the GM to like make sure that every player in there has something that they're struggling to do. And I think that makes the gameplay more exciting for them when they can see that I'm accomplishing my thing. I'm moving forward in my goal. But this game, everybody kind of consciously has to think about, like, what are my vows? What is it I'm trying to do? And I think if people made those vows, you swear on the iron, then they're going to be a lot more front of mind as you're going as a party. And I think it's going to include people more. It feels like.
There's also I was just say one thing with it I really enjoyed, and we kind of had a time frame what we were playing, but really, like, from a playability standpoint, if your players are continuing to make these vows, it's pushing the story farther, and you have increasing, like, it's exponential in some ways. Like, if you're like me, who I'm like, every place I go, the reason I kept fighting all the wolf chieftains is like every place I'd go, I'm like, I swear on I'm like making oaths all over the place. It's like, I'll make an oath for this, and you have an oath, and you have an oath, all these things. And so, like, I could have probably pushed the story into years of play just by all the like oaths I was making. And I think that's a really cool thing for just like playability and the longevity of a game, even there's just so much that can kind of build off of that.
Yeah, and there are group vows and there are individual vows. So our group vow was about the dragon, but individual vows happen. So I was just looking over a character sheet here, and one of my vows was founding this kind of utopia thing that I'd had a dream about or something like that, and I had another vow of saving my sister. These were in solo games, but those are two completely separate issues to go after, but sometimes they may connect. And that's the other thing I like, is that if you were to GM this, right, for our sending GMs, these are plot hooks, right?
Yeah,
Those
right.
vows tell you exactly
Right.
what your character wants to do.
Mhm.
And you can go, whoa, wouldn't it be cool if that vow overlapped with that vow, right? And you could,
Yeah, right, right.
and you could put those things together. So again, it's driving that story forward.
That's
So
that's wonderful, especially for a GM to have
yeah,
that information and
Yes.
not have to like pry
right.
harder and harder to get
Mhm.
people to tell you.
Yeah. So a question I have, and I have like a two prong, and Eric, you can decide which direction you want to go first. One more like mechanic that I'd love to hear you talk into is the Oracle,
Oh yeah.
and like how that works in the game, because I think that's another one of those, like, this is a very, at least what I've played, this is very unique and like kind of sets a tone for the game. But a question I had, so we did, you kind of were the GM slash player, but
Yeah.
you very much included like Evan and I in the game when it was like, and you're going to talk into the Oracle, but like this thing was rolled like, you come across a natural danger, and then like we would
Mhm.
talk and be like, okay, well, what would be cool for us as a party to come across? And we kind of hash that out and then move forward with the story. Do you feel like the question I have is like, do you feel like there's room for, like, if I'm a GM of this game and I'm just running, I'm not like playing as a player too, is there room to come in with like, this is the story I want to tell and we want to drive that forward? Like we've talked about arcs and campaign planning and stuff like that. Or do you feel like it needs to be more like, hey, this is open for us to build on our way out? So if, I don't know which way you want to talk, because I feel like the Oracle plays into that, but
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think it does have to be a little bit more open.
mhm,
Than you're not on the rails.
yeah,
However, it's more about how you interpret the story. So
okay,
one of the greatest tips I ever heard for running games, because we've all said this before. You plan a session that you're going to go take this tower and you're going to go up 3 floors of this tower tonight, and then you get to the table and the player's like, you know what? We changed our mind. We don't really want to go to that tower. We want to go over to this
yeah,
cave over here. And you're like,
yeah.
throw everything out. Um, so one of the greatest tips I've ever heard was no matter where they go, it's that tower. So
Yeah.
Those are the fights. Yeah.
now, if they're going to a cave system, well, guess what? There's now 3 levels to the cave system, and it has bad guys that have these stats. They just look like spiders now instead of wizards. So
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah.
and so I think there's a little bit of that
Mm,
that can keep you on the rails if you are a GM and you kind of have a story to tell. But one of the founding principles of Powered by the Apocalypse types games that Dungeon World really solidified, and I don't know that Ironsworn says this outright, but it definitely has the intention for it,
mm,
is play to find out. Play
Yeah.
to find out.
okay.
So, there's this story, but it's not the GM telling the story. It's not, it's the GM and the players collectively coming together that are discovering this. And so the GM gets part of that fun of discovery too. So I think you got to
Mm,
play a little bit more open ended. And the oracles, you're
yeah.
right, can play a piece in that. So there are kind of 2 levels to the oracles. And so one, I'll talk about the mechanical differences. One is in the moves themselves. And so, here is an oracle that's in the suffer moves. So anytime you endure harm, right? So it says if you endure harm and you get a miss, or if you're at 0 health, then you have to roll on this oracle table, right?
Mm,
And so 1 through 10, it says the harm is mortal and you face death, right? But that's only a 10% chance. 11 through 20, you're dying, you need to be healed, but if you're not healed soon, you're going to face death. Okay, 21 to 35, you're unconscious. 36 to 50, you're reeling and fighting to stay conscious.
mm,
So, you're still there, but if you engage in rigorous activity, you're going down.
right.
And 51 to 00, you're battered but still standing.
Mm,
So even if you're at 0 health, there are still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different outcomes with different probabilities of happening.
yeah,
That
right.
that if you're the GM and you're like, okay, shoot, I just TPK'd the whole party, and you're like, oh no, I didn't. They're all still standing. They're all still fighting, and
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
or it could be that you're like, the chances of him having to face death, it's only 10%. He's not going to, so that could happen. And even when you face death, like when you are dying, here's what happens, right? A strong hit, death rejects you. A weak hit, you get to choose, you die, but you make this huge noble sacrifice that changes the story. That's in the weak hit, right? Or death desires something of you in exchange for your life. And so you make a new bargain and swear a new iron vow and come back to life. So, and these are all based on how you roll the dice. So you got to kind of leave a little bit of it open, right? You got to leave a little bit of that open. And then the other part of the Oracle is a lot of what I talked about on our solo one, which is using more things like the action and theme. I think were so if I flip open the Ironsworn book here right in the middle, it just lands right in oracles because there's so many of these oracles. And if you get to a new location, you might roll, okay, well, what location are we at? I might roll in it's a swamp. Okay, well, what about the swamp? Well, here's a location descriptor. It says protected. Ooh, well, why would there be a protected swamp, right? What's in this swamp? And again, that drives the story, right? There's something there worth protecting. And so those are just small ones. The big ones are the action and theme, which is when you're just not sure. You roll a D100 for an action and a D100 for the theme. And some of them are like verb noun combinations, right? So like here's one that would be explore debt. Right. So you put the action is explore and the theme is debt. So if we came across an NPC and we're like, man, what's up with this NPC? Explore debt. Oh, well, he's looking to pay off a debt and he needs our help with a side quest. Do we have time to go on that side quest? Right. And so again, it gives opportunities for stories, more iron vows. And using these kind of oracles is really a muscle. Right. The more you practice. So if you're an ascending GM out there and you're going, I can't do this. There's no way I can make stuff up like this on the fly. You can't at first, right? It might take you a little bit, but the more you practice, the better you get at it. And like Adam said, you can open it up to the table and have a discussion, which is what we did. And we would go, okay, here's this. I was thinking this. What were you guys thinking? And there were a couple times Evan was like, I'm not feeling that. I think it's actually more of this. And I'm like, oh, dang, you're right. That's totally what I would have thought. Or like that, like Microscope, the last thing we did with Evan, where at the end, the thing that we thought we were, the lich or whatever actually ended up being the thing from the time traveling and all that. Like, I never would have thought of that. Right. And you don't, unless you kind of have this group think opportunities, which is again, play to find out, play to find out what's happening in the story. And then everybody gets excited and is like, "Oh, I wonder what's happening next," right? Because you just don't know. And it's very cool that way.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's cool.
I like that a lot.
So
makes me want to play a game right now.
I mean, honestly, it's good times. It's good
well,
times.
he's coming out with second edition at some point in the next 2 years. So
I've got to play first edition first. I would feel incomplete if I just started with second edition.
Yeah, well, there are a couple, things that I think he streamlined in the sci-fi version, which is called Starforged, and he really brought in more relationships too, where now there are progress charts for how you get with your relationships with people, and that can change kind of bonuses that you get too. So 2E might be pretty cool, but even a step above Ironsworn. But that would be hard. But I think it could happen.
I think what you're really saying is, Matthew, you've got to play Ironsworn, or Starforged, and Ironsworn 2E. I got to keep all these words right in order.
Yes.
So if someone's out there listening to this and they're wanting to get into this, Eric, is the drive-through RPG, is that our best bet, or like what would you say to people who are wanting to jump in?
Yeah, so it depends on your flavor. So if you want, kind of a little bit darker fantasy, survival, you're in this wintry wilderness land, just trying to eke out an existence, type fantasy, then you want Ironsworn, and that's still available for free on drive-through. And again, just an absolutely groundbreaking, amazing game. If you like sci-fi more, then the sci-fi version, Starforged, is very similar, and humanity has been sent out to the stars. Earth's system was kind of blown up or something, and we're struggling to survive out there. But definitely way more kind of going on because you're at a huge galactic level rather than just at a continent level. That is not only available on drive-through, but Modifius picked it up because it's so good. Now, just to put this in perspective, Modifius, they sell the One Ring, right? Like Lord of the Rings stuff. They sell all these big name things and Ironsworn Starforged because it is that good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he really upped the ante on how things look. So he's got a cool reference guide for you on Starforged that is just absolutely gorgeously illustrated by Joshua Meehan. The different types of stars you can come across, and the what's on a shattered world and an ocean world, and different things like different space creatures that you can come across. Right. So if you're more sci-fi, you can do that. He's also starting a Kickstarter next week that you should get on for the Sundered Isles, which is more of a pirate flavor of Ironsworn.
Okay.
So he's going to take the Starforged engine, which is just a slightly updated Ironsworn engine, and put that into more of a pirate's, so that instead of upgrading your spaceship, which you do in Starforged, you now have your pirate ship that you can add cannons to and special magical sails or whatever.
Nice.
And there's a chaos die. So that's where you would go to get the flavor that you want. And then for ascending GMs to really kind of, if you had trouble grokking it, which I did, absolutely, you need to check out the podcast that Sean Tompkin did with his son. That's a great one to listen to, just to kind of hear how it goes. But I would also 100% recommend Me, Myself, and Die on YouTube here, season 2, where he took his first season was in Savage Worlds, and he took a character from the Savage Worlds and transferred it to Ironsworn, and then played a whole campaign in Ironsworn. And he is a voice actor who runs in the same circles with Matt Mercer and all those guys. And he is just absolutely amazing. He's got like 7 cameras set up, shooting him from different angles, and it is like watching a movie unfold. He is so good, but he does a great job of showcasing what's in the system, and then also showing how he supplements it. So, for example, he didn't particularly like the names that were in the Ironsworn system, because they were for, we had some bog standard names for the Ironlanders, but also elves and the Varu, who are the wolf people and stuff like that. And he went with another supplement, right? And so he's got some good suggestions for that. So I would check those out, and then try it. That's the third thing is you're gonna fumble at first through it, but try it out. And I think after you see the videos or listen to the podcast for how it's run, you'll kind of get the feel for it. But it probably took me 3 or 4 sessions before I really got a handle on how to do it myself, so that I could flow with it. So because it's so different, just stick with it. And oh man, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, cool. Rob's given the plug for Me, Myself, and Die also in the chat. So it's cool to hear that. So,
I just looked it up as we were talking on the queue.
It is amazing. I can't believe what he does production wise on that.
So final thing, as we're kind of moving into our NPC here in a second, but I do want to give just space. You got anything in the hopper right now, or things that like you've done for resources? I know you create also. Are there opportunities to find that?
Yes. Since I've got back into Guild Wars 2, I gave up on writing supplements because legendary armor is more important. But I'm almost done with a magic supplement for Starforged. But I have 2 lines of products that are available. Ironsmith is my Ironsworn stuff, and then Starsmith is my Starforged stuff.
Okay.
And so for Ironsmith, I've got a bunch of rules about there's like corruption and how to write vows. I've got kind of different ways to flavor it, where I've looked at different cultures around the world and kind of looked at their mythological monsters and how to maybe change the world of the Ironlands to fit kind of those mythological creatures a little bit better. And then I also did expanded oracles. And so all that stuff is available on drive-through, but if you want your oracles in the spiral format, it's on Lulu. And then the Starsmith stuff, again, I've got the expanded oracles, but one that I'm particularly happy with is my my mechs supplement, where you get to be in these big stompy mechs, and you develop the mech that you want to have and go out and do that. And plus, I added aliens, because Starforged is human only, and I added in some alien cultures and how to really do a deep dive into thinking what is important to our culture, and how does that affect kind of the overall feel of our NPCs that are in that area. So you're welcome to check out my stuff on Drive-Thru, and Lulu for a couple of those spiral bound things.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I tossed the Ironsmith. If you're in the chat or watching this later, it's in the comments, and you should be able to get to Eric's other things easily through that too. So, and
it's free, just like Sean. I put it out for free, and if you like it and you want to throw me a couple bucks, you know what? I can get coffee every once a week maybe.
Right.
So
that's awesome.
I'd appreciate it. Yeah, but get it for free. Make sure it's fun first. So
cool. Awesome.
Guys,
Thanks, Eric.
this is a game you're all going to want to try, and I know I'm speaking as someone who hasn't, and I want to try. So I'm going to have to find a time when we can all get together. I'm getting ready to go on sabbatical, but maybe there's a time in there. I don't know. Okay, we'll talk.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Love it.
All right, well, we're going to move from that to our NPC for the day, and then we're going to jump into a Haversack, and we're going to try and dump that Haversack out today if we can. We're going to try before I go on sabbatical, because I want to get to some of these. But first, we have Aldous Vale is our NPC. We every week we just kind of give you an NPC to think about for your games. This guy is a tragic former hero. He's an old guy. He'd be like, adventures, huh? Yeah, we're nothing but trouble. Probably a whole gang of goblins hanging out somewhere after you, and he's looking around for him. What we have here is an older man, Aldous. He has thinning hair, just wisps of white now, except for his bushy eyebrows and his scraggly beard. His armor hangs loosely about his emaciated frame. He's even his short sword he carries seems too big for him, even though it's just a short sword. Aldous has this nervous twitch, and I like characters like this as you're playing, because for me, it'd be like rubbing his face and looking around, maybe scrunching up an eye as he's talking. Adventures, honey. Kind of rub that and do that. So you got some built-in role playing there. He's anxious. He's nervous all the time, believing that danger is going to come at any second. When encountering strangers, he keeps looking past them to see what nastiness is following them. Also a good thing you can do when role-playing. Personality. When he can calm his nerves, he's pleasant and hospitable, but unfortunately, he's anxious most of the time and refuses to let his guard down, lest the monsters take him without a fight, right? So the motivation is he wants one last shot at being a hero, but this guy's old. I mean, old, and he's really not going to be much of a benefit to your party. The background here, he's a tragic figure. He was once a great warrior, but his glory days are long past. He cares only for his village now, but he hasn't seen real trouble in decades. In an effort to keep his combat prowess intact, he sees danger behind every corner and constantly trains for the moment he's needed. Now, who knows what that training looks like? This dude out there trying to hit stuff. Unfortunately, the townsfolk pity him for the insane old man he is, allowing him to think that he's still their steadfast protector. So that's kind of cool. The town, I don't know if they're doing it maliciously or out of a kind-heartedness, but they let this old guy walk around pretending he's the protector. They all kind of play along with it. Really, he can do nothing. But he's this fun guy who's anxious and nervous and kind of always on the lookout. And you can come and have an interaction with him. What do you guys think of an NPC like this old guy, Aldous Vale?
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love the old man adventurer trope. Oh my gosh! I would totally make this guy hard to hear, or hard of hearing.
Hard of hearing. Easy to hear because he's yelling.
To hear. Yes, he's always yelling. And everything is misinterpreted. And, if he's around the party, he's always committing social faux pas because he's like, I think I smelled something bad over there by that guy. And he's like, shut up, it's the king, and maybe he goes on an adventure with you and he's also the bumbling hero. So the nervous tick to me is he's always trying to draw his sword and can never get it out. Or, he always tries to draw it and ends up falling over, or, the sword splits in half and he's sitting there trying to put it back together. But as he's doing that, it trips the lizards guys who are attacking, and it actually it's like Inspector Gadget bumbling and making it happen. Oh gosh, I would love this guy. I absolutely would love it. And then when he died, he would be laying there and he finally would have made that heroic sacrifice and be like, it is a good day to die. And, and he would and like just
But then
fulfilled
he
his
just
lifelong
lays
dream.
there.
Yeah.
But then he just lays there coughing for another like
Yes.
3 hours.
And then
because
Pee Wee
it
Herman
really
said,
wasn't time.
you know, like, yes, exactly. So,
I can see this being a very Eric Bright character.
yes.
Yeah. I think it's the place I'm in my life with kids, but like, and I don't know if this will land at all for you guys, but it's like to me, an older version of Branch from the movie Trolls, who like, I don't know if you guys have seen that. He's the like, there's enemies lurking at every turn. I have my house like completely stashed so I can live for 10 years. If I have to hide in here, I can drink my own sweat, like that kind of thing. And just like everything's protected. And I really see that with like, as they're, not only is he like constantly looking behind them and doubtful about everything, but also you like go to his home for some reason and it's just like there's 37 locks on the door and there's weapons under every table, and all this stuff of just, I'm ready kind of deal to do this. So
he's got one of those big log traps over his table that like swings over and you're like, dude, we're trying to eat. What?
Yeah. Right.
Why do you need this here?
Yeah. I think he's a good one. I do like to, and I've said this for several of these NPCs, but I think because he's a former hero, even though it's like all the current stuff is just kind of, to me, turns out kind of more funny than anything. I think that's another chance to like show stuff in the past. Like he did at one time travel and do heroics and things. And even if maybe he's living in the past rather than the present, I think you can point to some like history points. Maybe he has a piece of lore within all this insanity that's going on that actually matters to the players, to the characters. And Rob says crossbows accidentally going off around the house. I like.
Yes.
Don't go in there. Don't open that door. I think you can do something with like rumors or lore, or like maybe some of his like things that he's frightened of actually are true, and that can lead to some stuff. I think that could be a good way to bring those things in there too.
So another tip I picked up from the lazy DM is always have some secrets and clues that can be dropped, and this guy could really drop some secrets, I think. Particularly if he does have that moment where he's dying and doing the Pee Wee Herman thing, maybe he comes lucid and goes, and says, I never told anybody, but here's something terrible, that I did. And that's what drove me to be who I am. That's the root of it. I couldn't deal with it anymore. And it's in that kind of poignant moment that the PCs are like, oh my gosh, you were more than this comic relief. We never knew that. And then, but we got to clean up your mess. Like,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so that's again, another story hook you could go from.
Yeah, for sure.
Love that.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So there's a great NPC, Aldous Vale. Use that guy. We're going to jump into the Haversack.
Yeah.
Both arms in. Adam, start pulling it out for us.
Jumping
we're
right
going to
out.
knock these out fast.
Haversack question, the Magic Sword Edition. This is from Wataya Hotel 98. And there actually is a crossover with Evan Bright. So we're going to ask two at once here in a second. Dear Matthew and Adam, I forgot to send this earlier, so this one's coming in hot. Number one, when it comes to sentient magical items, have you ever used any of them successfully? I think they could be fun, but it may be a little tricky to role play. And then I'm going to jump over to Evan here for a second because he asked a similar question. He is asking any advice on how you would run or want to run intelligent items. So we're going to kind of double those up at the same time.
Okay. I love intelligent items. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't use them as often as my love for them would in my mind seem like I do, but occasionally I will have an intelligent item. And when I do, I like to give that intelligent item character like it's an NPC. And I like for it to be able to make some decisions that don't always coincide with what its bearer wants.
Right.
Depending on the the personality that it gets. You know, not all of them are going to be that cantankerous and kind of rebellious. Some of them are going to be strongly for good. But I like the idea that based on a role of some sort, it's possible that this item and the bearer will be at odds, and the item will win. So I will use an example since Eric is on the show here. In one of my campaigns, Eric picked up this sword that had an evil, intelligent personality, and he was at war with it. And once I had him roll and he lost, and as he was walking down the road, he just takes the sword and splits this young boy in half.
Yeah,
and
I killed the kid. It was terrible.
Eric's character was a very good, righteous, holy, upstanding character. And that's not something that he liked at all. And that happened. And so bad. I think those kinds of things it's like we were talking about with the Ironsworn. They give a chance for story, and then you get a chance to see, how does this person react? What do they do with the weapon? What happens because of this in the story? And there's just like all of this ability to add to the story.
Yeah.
Imagine a chaotic good character having a lawful good item. Like, ooh.
Yeah. I don't know if it's successful. So roll back for a second. One of the first things I remember being like totally gripped by when it came to when specifically we got into D&D, I read the piece on intelligent items in the magic items section and was just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And like, I think ever since then, I gotta have one of those. And I think that's like a thing that's probably has gripped me, and I want to be a part of things pretty regularly. And I don't know if you'd call this successful, but so in the Jade Masks game, there is a sword that is tied to one of our players, Pip, his old patron that he has cast off. He turned from warlock to cleric and cast off that demon patron and turned to the Moon Maiden as his deity kind of thing. And that sword is connected still to that patron, maybe inhabited by him. But the success I think that's there is that Pip was like, I'm going to have a lead box made, and I'm going to carry the sword around in that lead box because it kept whispering to him. And that was something that Havilar was his old patron, is trying to get back into the world and was trying to get him to like cut the ley line with the sword. And he eventually made that turn. But at every end, that sword was like, pull me out, you can use me now to cut this, it's like constantly trying to just dog him. And he just was like, I'm sticking this thing in a lead box. Nobody else is getting it, but like, it's going to be in this. So that's kind of how, I had played that. He actually has a second sentient item, which is kind of crazy, but it is a good one. And it's so far been kind of played mechanically, where he can actually summon this like elf maiden warrior from the past who comes out of the sword and can do some things and kind of supplement his like cleric abilities there. So
I'm gonna throw out something here. If you're thinking, I'd like to maybe do something with an intelligent item like a sword, and what would that look like? If you're a reader and you have free time and you don't have anything to do, read Son of the Black Sword by Larry Correia. I don't even know how you say his last name. Correia. Son of the Black Sword, and then it's the first of 5, and it's about this sword. In this book, there are these swords that are made of this one kind of metal, and they're intelligent. And the thing is, everyone wants to own one because you become like superhuman when you have this sword, because it basically has the memories of every bearer that's ever had it, and imparts their ability to you. And so you move almost faster than a person would seem like they're able to, because of just your knowledge and your reflexes. But also, this sword, if it doesn't deem you worthy, and you try to pick it up, it'll either cut you up and make you drop it because you won't be able to hold on to it, or it'll kill you. It can straight out kill you. So people, when they decide to take up this sword, they have to make this effort. But anyway, in this story, this guy has this sword, and he is known as the greatest swordsman. And then at some point, the sword is like broken, and a shard of it goes into his body. and changes him from the inside. It's a really good series of books, and it also kind of plays out this idea of an intelligent item and its owner, and like the difference in like what the owner is all about and what the intelligent item is all about.
Right.
Not that your intelligent item always has to be a sword. Here's the thing: I almost always make them weapons, but how cool would it be to make an intelligent item that's something else?
Yeah.
Not a candlestick. That might be a little boring, but like something, think of some other things that could be intelligent items, and what would their intelligence do for you? Because you're always thinking, oh, this intelligent item, how does it affect my combat? But what if you had an intelligent item that affected some other part of the role playing?
Right.
The sorting hat from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
I think I mentioned this last time too, but there is a game that if you want to put a sentient magic item in your game, you could get the backstory of it and build it out and its personality through a game called Artifact. And it has lots of different things. It's the only RPG that has actually just made me cry as I sat here. I sat and played it by myself, writing about this shield that was broken in half. And like, I actually cried about this thing. And it was a sentient shield. So check out that game for sure. I think it's Mouse Hole or something. Yeah. Called Artifact. So.
I'll have to link all these things. Cool. Going on here with Thai Hotel, have you ever homebrewed your own magic items? If so, what are some tips that you might have for that?
Well, this game Artifact sounds like it's exactly that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, whether you go that deep is what Artifact offers, and it gives you lots of good prompts for, maybe this is a boot, maybe this is a hat, maybe it's, a shield, maybe it's a staff, maybe it's a whatever, some gadget. But when you're homebrewing your own magic items for whatever campaign you're in, you don't necessarily have to go that deep. I wouldn't suggest, but I would say it needs to be, interesting. It should have some hooks in it. And so, unfortunately, where D&D kind of went for a little while was your character became your magic items. Like you were only as powerful as the magic items you had, which lent everybody to trying to get the +5 sword and the +5 armor and the +5. And that's awesome. Like, don't get me wrong. I want to hit every creature every time, do max damage, and never be hit once with my AC of 45 or 50. I understand that. That's me. Okay. But there should be some cool magic items in there too, that bring to mind something that you could problem solve with, whether it's the endless decanter of water. I think you guys talked about at one point during your magic item discussion, or something like that, and see what the players are interested in, right? And look at something and go, man, what would be crazy? Could this be used? The immovable rod, right? How many ways could this thing be used? The portable hole from Acme, Bugs Bunny. Where's what could we do with that? So think of something interesting that will hook players and allow them more options to resolve conflicts. But my caveat is, don't go overboard. Right. So don't try and give too many magic items that do weird things like that, because it's way too hard to keep track of and to remember that you have them. I would make, one kind of special something per person at a time, maybe 2 if you're going crazy. But otherwise, it gets lost on the character sheet, and people are like, "Oh, I had that. I totally forgot I had that." Right. And so ask the characters too, because they or the players, because their character might be into creating magic items or designing things, especially if they're of the arcane or divine type. And what would your character research? What would your character try and put together, and why? And again, that can lead to more story, but also lead to some pretty cool and unique magic items.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I have homebrewed. I don't know that I feel like it's usually like, what is the reason I need to do this? There's so many magic items out there. I do think I care less about balance anymore.
Right. Exactly.
When I'm like, I think, and part of it's that story element of like having played more story oriented things where it's like, okay, I don't think that this is going to break things anymore. So that's not as big of a deal for me anymore. But I do think, like, what is the unique reason that I need to make something new to give these players? And I do like that idea of, like, if there's somebody who's out there crafting things, that's cool that they aren't just making like, oh, I'm you make a +1 sword. It's like, no, what's the unique flavor that character can do to that? I think that is a cool idea. Yeah. Cool. All right. Next for Watai Hotel. Finally, when it comes to buying and finding magical items, how do you deal with rarity? As a player and a GM, I find it tough to make magical item purchases / discovery feel fulfilling without just throwing items at the PCs want in their path. At the same time, you want to make it feel rare and not cheapen the experience. So how do you balance between making items either too easy to acquire or too difficult? As always, thank you for inspiring these ascending GMs. Sincerely, Watai Hotel 98.
Session 0, man, you got to start with setting those expectations, I think, as you go into that campaign, because if you're playing a game like D&D or Pathfinder, again, that's expecting you to have magic items. Like the math of 3.5 depended on people getting magic items at a certain level. So what I like to do at this point is just eliminate that completely and go, okay, everybody's getting a +1 automatically to go, at this level, or +3 at this level, or whatever. Make that happen automatically so that there's room for the more story and narrative items. And then I don't have to worry about breaking the game or worry about the rarity of it. It is what would be cool and useful, for the story. And I think you can avoid that issue of having to feel like, okay, it's got to be at this degree and cost this much money and all that stuff. Just throw that whole thing out. This is my suggestion.
Yeah, I think maybe it was Eric in a game he ran. He did kind of what the Guild Wars. What Guild Wars did, where you have this ancestral weapon that gets better as you. I can't remember if you ran a game like that or not, but where as you get to this level, everybody's ancestral weapon kind of increases in goodness. It's kind of what I have done a little bit with these power stones that are in the dormant mind. At certain levels, they gain abilities and they're unique. So you're not going to go out and buy one at the local magic store. You're just not going to find one. These are the 7 that are in the world. And if it's an ancestral weapon, these are the ones that are there. And it's not like you can just go find somebody else's ancestral weapon. And so I love to deal with, again, I'm always about epic and prophetic, and like you happen to be the person who was chosen and you just never knew it. And so these things come into your life more than they would a normal, farmer who just lives in this village. But that's how you get these powerful things. And it's not like anybody can just go buy this.
Yeah, I have recognized I tend to give too much. So that's something
possible?
I don't know if that's possible. Yeah.
I think from like the thing Eric said about like, okay, there can be too much where the players have like lost track of what you even have in your haversack, kind of thing. And I think that's the thing where it's like, okay, have magic items just become too prevalent, and it's easy to be like, well, okay, they need some loot. There's a +1 ring of protection and cloak of resistance and this dagger that's got a enchantment on, and it's like I can tend to like throw that out a lot, and I do wonder, okay, has this become so much that it's just mundane now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So trying to watch that a little bit.
Well, think about our Ironsworn game again. We didn't come across any magic items really that were mechanically different. In fact, we didn't even level up at all.
Right.
We didn't even deal with experience. We went that whole game. And I think if you're focusing in on making a good story together, then some of these questions fade more into the background.
Yeah.
For sure. And so you give out a ring of protection +1, and it gets to a point where everybody's like, oh, I don't need that. That I've got another thing. Fine. They don't need that. But how satisfying is it when you're in the middle of, a dungeon or someplace, and there's somebody has to get in this door, and then somebody's like, hey, I've got this piece of chalk, and if I draw a little square in there, that'll lock this door. And like that's been sitting in their backpack forever, and you forgot they had it. They forgot they had it, but they were looking at their sheet and they see this, and then they pull it out, and it's like
cool. The lock chalk.
That is really satisfying. Yeah, that is a cool thing when I do like that. So.
Yeah.
Well,
all right, what's next?
Yeah, kind of talked about one of Evan's questions, kind of moving to him. Thank you, Wataya Hotel, for your questions. And actually, we'll come back to one of yours maybe in a second. So this is Evan Bright, Haversack questions, casting resurrection on magic topic. Number one, when some of your PCs like warlocks or clerics get their powers from some greater being, how often does that being or one of their servants check in with the PC? Perhaps to offer a boon, give advice, request a mission, or review their performance.
I'm going to let you guys kind of take off with this one because I barely ever give people powers.
Yeah. I as often as the story needs it, would be, but I would say actually not as often as I would like to see, in games. There was that game we played with Danny where I was the Minotaur who had that holy book, and like I wanted to have contact with my deity. Like I wanted to see what is there because I just didn't know. And never did, and that was deeply unsatisfying. Although that was a good X factor that I could kind of get some of the teachings from that book. So again, I think this goes back to your kind of session 0 and kind of where the story is going is, does that play a big role? So if you look at Critical Role and like the Raven Queen played a big part in interacting with characters. But if that's not the case, if you're just a lower level cleric, and the character's not playing out, the player is not playing out that connection between the character and the deity, then maybe that power doesn't need to show up. So that's a very vague answer, but I think as the story demands.
Yeah.
And I'll throw out kind of tagging onto that. So you had that book and you longed for that interaction. I have a character like that right now who is almost in love with his god of choice, Arafel, and he's in this chat right now. He'll know who I'm talking about. And he's had very little interaction with her, but he longs for it. And I have plans for that to happen in there. But the thing is, when it does happen, it's like so exciting for him every time. So there he is. He's coming.
Listen here, Matthew.
Listen here. But I do think that, like you said, as the story demands and as like kind of is that thing that when it happens, that character's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. This just happened. My night just got much better. So like if you had your book and like you looked in it and there was 2 pages written in there and you're like, okay, guys, settle down. I've got to do this. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely want to let the players, I would love for the players to drive that. Like if I have a warlock or a cleric, and for them to be seeking that out is like a better drive, in my opinion, than me pushing it on them. But then I can respond. So it's like, oh, I want to go pray. I want to go. I lost what the word is. There's actually a spell even where you try to like speak to your patron or something.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll come to me in a second. But like I would prefer to meet them in that moment because they're going after it. But if they're not, maybe they're kind of confused about it. I like the idea of definitely bringing that in at times for part of that spotlight, or maybe that's like even the driving force of an arc of you need to go to this holy site and find out this information from your patron, from your deity, those kind of things. I think that can be a cool role for that. So like for me, there have been moments where there's a vision. I like visions. I like dreams. I like having a avatar show up at different times. I like even like recently, well, not about midway through our game that we're doing now, there was even like, this is another acolyte of this god who realizes, oh, you're one of us too, and pulls the person aside and says, hey, I think I may have some ways to help you with this, to like learn the path, kind of thing. So I think all of those can I like that kind of stuff to play a role, but I would prefer if the player is the one driving the narrative, there, rather than me like constantly doing that, because sometimes it's maybe just not as important to them, and you can kind of play off of that too.
And for a new GM out there, just kind of a nuts and bolts thing. First of all, it doesn't just have to be a god. For instance, we've talked about factions and stuff like that. My
Yes.
character recently kind of got involved with something called the IPS. It's like the CIA. They're all about like being all over the world, kind of in plain sight. That's what the IPS stands for, in plain sight, but nobody knows who they are. They're gathering information and they're assassinating people that need it. That's their whole role in the kingdom. And my guy's like, he's gotten interested and connected in wanting to become part of this. And so it doesn't just have to be gods. It can be like, but this is something that like, it'd be cool every couple levels if somehow this person just kind of came out of nowhere and said, with the IPS, you need to do this now.
Yeah, right,
Or,
right.
here's you a new ability, you know, because they get this ability to like be like the gray man or the thin man, where they can be in plain sight and people just have a hard time like noticing them. And, you know, so maybe something could be bestowed on this character, like at a level, and like bring that back around. Those kinds of things are cool for characters. And so as a new GM, just in your head, think, okay, every 2 or 3 levels, I'm going to try and revisit, you know, what's important to this character. What's important to this character? Is it a faction? Is it a god? Something. I'm going to try and every couple of levels, maybe have a touch in there. And so that maybe that'll help.
Like the Smoking Man and X-Files, or when we played Sentinels, Adam, I kept going back to the Freedom 5, trying to go to our upper level superhero team. So it could be just about anything.
Yeah, for sure. So Evan's got 2 more questions. He originally asked one and then kind of revamped, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So I'm going to tell you guys, let's answer this question, but we don't defend our answer.
Yeah,
we
one word.
Okay.
Your campaign world's greatest wizard, cleric, druid, and scion enter a cage match with only one victor. Which supernatural power source reigns supreme?
The Warlock.
What?
I'm going with the Scion. I'm going to go with the Scion, man. Psionics.
I'm going to go druid.
Okay.
Evan, I don't know if that's very satisfying just for us to say a word and not explain it, but there it is.
Here's why.
He's breaking the rules.
Yep.
People can. No. Why I'm doing it this way? So he said later, he sent another email to us and said, since question number 2 is probably not useful for ascending GMs, I'd like to replace it with the following. So I still wanted to answer it, but 2B was this: when it comes to villainous magic users, evil clerics and necromancers easily come to mind. Any advice on what a villainous druid or a villainous scion might be like that would set them apart from their arcane and divine associates? Which is a
Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy's your villainous druid.
Yeah.
Because I think there's the theme of eco-terrorism type of stuff that you can go through with that. And I think I've used that a couple times before, where it's just like, okay, you're going to burn the forest. Well, then the forest is going to eat all of you,
Yeah, right.
So disproportionate response.
Rob said Greenpeace druids.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as far as a scion, when I think of an evil, like psionic character, a character who can control mind stuff a lot. Obviously that can go lots of directions, because just like a wizard has spells that can be all over the range, it's not just charming and suggesting, it's also, evocation and all those different schools. But the one that comes to mind, I don't even remember. I start this. It was one of those Marvel series, girl with dark hair, was like a detective.
Jessica Jones.
Jessica Jones.
Yeah.
So she had this guy who like could just tell people, suggest, and they would do whatever. That seems like a great villainous man. I looked at that and I thought, man, that would be an awesome power. It'd be like hard not to abuse it. And that guy did. I mean, like he would just tell people, you're going to do this, and they would do it, and they would have to like stay in his thrall. And it's like, what a cool villainous psionic type character.
And bonus, it was David Tennant. So I mean, who was also Doctor from Doctor Who. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I think I love both of those things, and like it's motivation and it's what they do, so like you guys hit on this, but like with the druid thing, I feel like the motivation, is I'm protecting this land, but it's not just about protecting anymore. It's about revenge.
Punishing
it's about vengeance. It's punishment. Or the whole world's a forest now. Like all
Mhm.
civilization is gonna burn, and we're gonna take over, because it's like pushing too far with those things. And I love the mind control thing, or even a psionic going so deep in the aspect of the mind and knowledge and that kind of, which I guess you can kind of do with wizard too, but they're digging so deep into that it's like there's no concern for the outside world anymore, but it's like affecting that in some pretty horrible ways. So I think, Rob said proactive protection with that too. Like I just think like the motives get skewed in a way that's like antagonistic to the world, and then
Yeah.
they have to be stopped.
What a cool world to play in, though, that you just came up with. What if your PCs were warped to this planet or whatever that was jungle? The whole thing. The whole thing is just this jungle.
Right.
There's not a sentient being on the whole planet other than this one druid who is like
Mm-hmm.
stone barked over in this tree that suddenly begins to wake back up once he or she senses that there are more sentient beings that just showed up.
And all you find everywhere is like cities that have just been ravaged, overgrown, and you can hardly even find it, but there's like building parts and, technology gone.
Yeah. Will not rest until everything is the tree.
Mhm.
So, that's cool. That's cool. Those are good questions, Evan. I think that's probably a good place to stop, even though we only have one more. Let's do the one more. I'm sorry.
Let's do it. We're going to get through this
let's do
before I hit sabbatical and we go on our pre-recorded,
Yeah.
because when we get back, we're going to have a bunch of Haversack stuff. Keep sending in those questions, but let's hit it.
All right. So this is Wataya Hotel again, Haversack question, moving edition. Dear Matthew and Adam and Eric, this week I wanted to ask about character creature movement. I may have skipped over it in my 5e books, so this is 5e, but I was wondering how you move larger creatures on a grid. I've never had to use larger creatures yet, but I may have to in the future. For any normal sized player character, I know that you move the mini or token 1 square for every 5 feet, but what about larger creatures or tokens that take up, let's say, 4 or 5 squares on its own? I have a feeling you simply move it into another group before 5 squares for every 5 feet that you wanted to travel, but I wanted to double check with us. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, so I sent a little image, which I don't have to show you. the image is for diagonal movement, but has a large creature in it. I love the show. I appreciate your advice to us ascending GMs. Sincerely, Wataya Hotel 98. So pretty
this
easily.
has got to be in a book, but it does just move 5 feet further in whatever clump, or it's easy if it's like a large creature. Instead of thinking of moving the square, just think of moving the crosshairs where the 4 squares meet. You're moving that, but you could always, if it takes up 17 squares, that's a weird creature right there. But let's say it did, you just move it 5 feet further and count those, whatever its movement is.
Yeah,
so
I have to think about that every single time, even with like a 10 by 10. I'm like, wait, what? But it's just that 5 by 5 by 5. I looked in the DMG and couldn't find that personally after seeing this question.
I felt like I'd seen that.
I think it's in there, but I think the best advice is just pick a corner as your crosshairs and go with it. Okay. The only other thing I would add about movement is don't worry about the diagonal movement of the 5 then 10 then 5 then 10 if you don't want to, because technically by the Pythagorean theorem it's not actually quite right. It's 1.4 instead of 1.5. So if you're going to mess up the math anyway, you may as well keep it simple.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
I do agree with that. That's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cool.
All right. Well, hey, we have emptied out the Haversack. We've enjoyed having Eric here on the show today to talk about Ironsworn. We are getting ready to head to those pre-recorded every 2 weeks. So the next episode is not next week, but in 2 weeks. It's pre-recorded. Adam will be on there live in case you have questions and comments. And then every 2 weeks for 3 sessions running, and then we'll be back live. So we thank you for joining us here on Rise the GM, and we hope you all have a wonderful sabbatical with me.
Thanks, Eric, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's lots of fun.
Awesome.